For the Apache display of the Army Air Force declared neutrality, passed various neutrality acts from 1935 onwards, but it was also re-arming, and it was important to train a new cadre of pilots, and that's where aircraft like the ones in front of us come in. Closer to us, the beautiful silver Ryan STA, and aerobatic up above, the Boeing Stearman PT-17.
Dutch East Indies. I think you agree, this is an absolutely beautiful aeroplane. T-Claude Ryan began aircraft. He in fact built the aircraft that Charles Lindbergh flew, the Spirit of St. Louis, and across the Atlantic in that very aircraft. He also designed this wonderful machine that we see performing today. I'm told that it flies as beautifully as it looks. Quite as brightly as all those years ago.
That's
a few STAs like this were actually delivered to the US Army Air Corps, and they became its first monoplane primary trainers. The XPT-16 was the prototype, and a small batch was then delivered. Here we see the rather more famous Boeing Stearman kaydet joining it in a bit of a loose tail chase. An aircraft hugely well known on the display circuit as a wing walking mount. We've seen the Breitling sponsored team here on many past occasions. But this is the military uniform known as a private venture by the Stearman Aircraft Company, based in Wichita, Kansas, firm acquired by Boeing in 1934. And they were built in enormous numbers, the Stearman kaydets, over 3,500 of them in 1940 alone. One of the type's best known uses was by the so-called Arnold scheme, instigated by the US Army Air Corps General Hap Arnold. It was one of several training schemes that the British set up to train its and Commonwealth pilots outside the UK. In total, almost 8,000 students entered that scheme, whom about 4,500 passed out successfully. The PT-17s carried out the primary element of that from 6 bases in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, before passing on to basic training on the Vultee BT-13 Valiant and the advanced stage on the North American T-6 Texan, which we'll be seeing in the program later. Of course, one of the challenges for trainees who had been instructed in beautiful weather overseas was the weather from the European theatre when they came back home. Over 8,500 Model 75 Stearmans were built by Boeing between 1936 and 44, and the company, which celebrates its centenary this year, says that the equivalent of 2,000 more were built out of spares. The one we see here, owned by Golden Apple Operations and based here at Duxford, was built in 1942 for the US Army Air Force. It's a big skeleton. It's allegedly the first kaydet based here since 2009. Meanwhile, the Ryan STA, owned by Peter Holloway, that leads this pair, dates from 1939. Recently, it had German Dr. K. Herzog as its owner, and it was based with the Flugflieger group of vintage aircraft at Paderborn-Lippstadt Airport. It hadn't flown for several years before Peter Holloway bought it last year. It's got a 4-cylinder Monasco C4S radial engine of 150 horsepower, giving this very elegant machine a top speed of approximately 110 knots. It was a significant aircraft, this, for its manufacturer, Ryan, because in somewhat altered form and with a different engine, a Kinner radial, it led to an aircraft called the ST-3 in 1941, and the later ST-3KR model, which again had more power, became the PT-22 Recruit, used extensively by the US Army Air Force as a primary trainer in the Second World War. Ryan Monasco entering in line for opposed to the radial Kinner that later took over. The last pass there by these two aeroplanes. The first time we've seen this Ryan at Duxford. Made its display debut at Old Warden, its home base, 3 weeks ago. The second Ryan this that Peter Holloway has owned as part of his fleet of vintage aircraft. He used to have a PT-22 recruit like the one I just mentioned.
So the final pass then for the Ryan, evocative of the period, of course.
Yes, the very evocative yellow and blue training livery of the PT-17, very apparent on this example. There they are, both downwind to land.